What's going on, everybody? We are back with another edition of Sold Separately. It's me, Clark Taylor, Anthony Ricciardi, our head of opinions. We're going to be talking figures, collectibles, memorabilia, as always. And I'm excited to be back. How about you, Anthony? How are you feeling today?
Absolutely. We have an awesome topic that we're going to be covering 40 years of the icon Sting and all the figures he's had over the years. It's so big, it's going to be 2 episodes.
We're going to have to divide this one by two. And as everyone knows, I hate doing math, but for this, I was a little stinger. I'm totally cool with doing a little bit of math, and we're going to divide it by two. But should we get right into it or what?
Absolutely. But one disclosure, you didn't do the math. Our super producer did the math, but take it.
I was about to give him the credit. Kobe, what's up? Show yourself. Speak. Kobe, where are you at,
That's
kid?
not a
I'm
dog.
right here.
Speak.
He's the man. No. We got to see him.
I'm right here.
The man
Yeah,
behind the scenes.
huh?
The man, the myth, the legend. There he is.
He's
The
awesome.
Cobster
Here.
He's
is
the man
in the building as always. Super producer, the best in the biz. We all know it.
You're now calling me the super stinger.
The
in
super
honor of
stinger.
Sting.
That's what you want to go with? Okay.
Stinger producer.
Yeah.
Speaking of little stingers, we know Kobe was himself too, so this is gonna be a fun episode for all of us. Let's talk about it though. Let's talk about the WCW. Is that the
Galoob.
Galoob?
Series 1.
I was like, how do you Galoob Series 1?
Mhm.
Two dudes with bad attitudes, and it's Lex Luger and Surfer Sting.
Yep.
What a hysterical figure. And talk about a time machine.
Yeah.
Anthony, talk to me about this figure.
The funny part is, this is one of those ones when I did the research, there were a few Stinger figures that really predated me. Like, I don't remember seeing this on the stands when I became a fan in early 98. So, with this figure being predating all that, I completely understand why I don't remember seeing it on the in the store back in the day. But it's one that I was talking to Kobe pre-show. Honestly, I love the Sting in this set. Like, I think it's a really cool Sting. It is hysterical to me when you look at it. The way they did the world title back then, it was just this cheap little thing that's a WCW across it, which really has no likeness to the actual title. And the Luger is actually a pretty cool Luger too that comes with it, and we know Sting and Lex in real life are very close friends. Sting is the one that got him back into WCW after his WWF run. So it is really cool, and it's the first of many Surfer Stings we're probably going to be seeing through this journey. But it's one that I didn't have, but honestly, I wouldn't mind having that Sting in my collection now. I don't know about you, Clark.
100%. No, it's an awesome figure. I had LJN Surfer Sting myself that we're going to get into eventually at some point here. But this is a great one. Luger, it's funny to me. Does anyone know off the top of their head which year this came out?
I'm going to say early 90s, early to mid 90s, but I'm going to double check.
It's got to be. That's what I'm most interested in, because it is very much 1990.
Yeah,
so yeah, this is one that it's funny because I think it's almost like a preview to what we're going to see later in the Sting action figure saga. Not only that, Sting's career. I mean, Lex Luger. So this is pre Lex Luger in WWE.
Yeah, this
as the potential Hogan replacement, and to me, that's fascinating. This is one of the earliest Luger figures. Not only that, Sting figures. You add in Sting's ties to the Ultimate Warrior and what we know about the backstory about all three. It's just a fun one in general. Would be a real cool one to own. I'm sure that this one, price point wise, is way up the ladder.
It would be interesting to know what that one goes for now, because again, this is one that predates me. In 1990, I was in Ninja Turtle phase, so I wouldn't have, I probably would have walked right past this back in the day.
Yeah, this is 1990.
Yeah, you were negative, I know.
I was
I,
-1.
yeah,
So there's that. Absolutely. I mean, 91, I made my debut with my mother pregnant in the finals. Michael Jordan, the switch hands game against the Lakers.
mm-hmm.
I was right there. And my mom was pregnant with me at that
Phenomenal
game.
transition, as
Not the
always,
point. But let's definitely. Well, hey, Luger's from Chicago. You might as well reference the Bulls while we're at it. Let's talk though about our next figure. Let's move to 1995.
Yep.
Let's move over to 1995,
Yes.
and let's talk about a WCW OSTFM.
The original San Francisco toy maker is what it's
There you go. The original San Francisco toy maker, Collectables Wrestler, Series 1 Sting. This is a classic.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first Sting figure that I owned in my lifetime, and it's a dang good one. It's a classic. Not a very playable figure, but in the lexicon of collectibles, it just has a special place because it's a great one. And it's an era of Sting that is often overlooked given how successful he was after 1995. But this is the Surfer Sting that I was initially introduced to and grew up loving and believing in. And the Sting that made me a little stinger, for lack of a better term. Anthony, I got to ask you about it. Your thoughts on this figure in particular.
Yeah, this is one that like I've seen through the years, different things online. Again, this predates me getting in the wrestling. The funny part is, and I don't know if you realize this, Clark, the company that made this a couple of years later, after WCW would start getting made by Toy Biz, this is the company that made the ECW figures after. This is iconic. The LJN style is very iconic with the WWF figures back in the day. The face paint is a nice job. It is kind of funny to me with the packaging is not the same face paint as it's on the figure. Uh, Kobe, if you could pull that back up, I don't believe it's the same face paint. Yeah, like in the image on the packaging, it's white and black, which it's kind of funny because that's almost a preview of Crow Sting in a lot of ways, isn't it, Clark? It's very similar to Crow Sting.
In some ways.
Yeah. And, and he's wearing the yellow and blue face paint in the figure, which is, the Surfer Sting was very colorful, which we'll obviously we'll get into what other Stings, but he's known for color. So it's kind of funny that the image that they used on the packaging isn't as super colorful as the figure.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. At that time, we still had Surfer Sting. It wasn't before he grew the hair out. I mean, it was before he grew the hair out, but it wasn't as the hair was being grown out when this was released in 95. The full change, the way it happened on screen, I think we're going to have figures down the line that represent that part of Sting's career. And,
Yes.
And to me, that's my favorite part of Sting's career, but it's neither here nor there when it comes to collectibles.
Shortly after this, because 96 is when he started with the brown hair. Before he went into Crow Sting, he started because you think Bash at the Beach 96, he had the brown hair. And prior to that, so this was probably towards the tail end of him with the flat top bleach blonde hair is 95. And then he started getting into the Sting that we all know.
And that's for sure. But before we get to the Sting that we all know, let's talk about another one from back in the day.
Yep.
And that's our next one from 1991 WCW. It's Galoob,
Galoob.
14-inch Sting figure.
Mm-hmm.
This one has some funk to it if I've ever seen it. And speaking of having the black and the face paint, this one does as well.
Mm-hmm.
Way predestines the last one we discussed. But Anthony, I got to ask you your thoughts on this one.
It's kind of funny that they made 14-inch figures. I don't know. It's not in the same vein as the wrestling buddies that WWF did around that time, because those were all like pillows, and this is like full sized. I definitely think as a kid, I would think it would be very eye catching if you're walking down the aisle and you see a 14-inch wrestling figure, especially somebody as colorful as Sting. Um, to be perfectly honest, as an adult looking at it, it's creepy as anything. The face is very creepy. That thing staring at you in a room is something else.
It's funky.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know how many of that line they made, but 14-inch wrestling figures is definitely something different. I mean, we don't really see that now.
That's basically like a Ken doll, as far as I know.
I think it might be bigger. Honestly,
it's probably taller. Either way,
not that I know what Ken doll sizes are, but I
same.
Just eyeballing it, I'm saying I think it's bigger.
It's probably taller.
Yes.
Let's talk though about another tag team figure, and this one's interesting because of our first topic of the evening. Yeah. Let's talk about this version of the Sting and Luger tag team. Mm-hmm. So much happened between the launch of the first one, topics wise, and this one. Mm-hmm. And it's equally a figure you're not going to be, you're not booking matches with these figures. Mm-hmm. This isn't necessarily something that you might play with, but collectibles wise, it's just something to have in your collection without question. You look at the Sting and Luger that we saw in 1990, right? Lex Luger has the push in WWE. WWF at the time returns to WCW. Crow Sting by then, and they reunite to have a second version of those figures launched. To have both of those in your collection, I think is something that is definitely worth your time. This one to me is more valuable because this is the Sting and Luger that I remember from my childhood the most. Now, the other one is interesting because Surfer Sting was how I was introduced to Sting. I mean, we've got Sting coming up at Revolution. Sting's tag team history, I think, is often overlooked.
Yeah.
Sting has long been an excellent tag wrestler, and to end his career in a tag team match, I think is fitting.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that's neither here nor there on the opponents. We're not going to get into that. That's not what this show is about. But I got to get your thoughts on that figure and in relation to the one we covered earlier from 1990.
It's funny because this is the first Sting figure I remember seeing in the store once I became a wrestling fan. Like I vividly remember seeing this one. I don't remember whether or not I remember the 2-pack, but I know they sold these both separately as well. It's kind of funny looking at it now. Like the version of the Crow Sting that's there almost looks like the sad clown, because he's got like the sad expression on his face. That's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of a sad clown that's frowning. But the funny part with these figures, Clark, and you'll remember this because they thought, for whatever reason, these toy makers thought we're going to have the figures vibrate because that's something kids would want. It's funny looking at it as an adult now. You're like, I don't know if this would have sold today. But again, the 90s were a special time that they got away with things that today they probably would not. Having two vibrating figures is not exactly kosher today, might be the best way to put it. But I remember these. I didn't have them, but I remember a friend that I grew up with had this figure. or had the vibrators. I remember that, and I remember holding it, going, "This is so weird," even as a kid, thinking that this was a bizarre thing. But like, this was a defining Monday Night War era Sting, and I think the reason Sting is so remembered as a solo act is because that period he was a loner. So like, it is kind of funny because you do remember that he's tagged with Luger multiple times over the years, and they, like I said, they have a real friendship. So it's kind of cool seeing this old school 2-pack from '95
Definitely. Let's move over to
or
1998.
98. 98.
I do want to ask one thing.
Yes.
So now that we've seen both of them, we've seen our WCW Nitro from '97, and then we have the 1990 WCW Two Dudes with Attitudes.
Wait, 95. We have 95.
No,
versus
that's
90.
not 90
Nope.
and 98.
90
It's
and
98.
96.
It was my mistake. It's 98.
Is it 98?
Is it 98 or 95, Cope?
I thought it was 90.
No, the second
No, it
one
is-
is 97.
97. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
There's two categories I want you both to say which is better with.
Yes.
Okay.
One, which has the better figures?
For me personally, oddly enough, I like the one from 90 because I think they're more I don't even want to use the word realistic, but like, the other ones are extra bloated because they have to have the mechanism for vibrating. So I like the 91 personally.
I'm going to disagree, but only because one of my most major factors when I judge figures is playability. And I do believe that the latter figures, those two that are on the screen right now, in my eyes, are more playable.
Yeah.
So for me as a collector growing up, my greatest memories were going to the store to get new ones, but it was to try to book my own shows and use the figures, unbox them, and actually, operationally, right?
Yeah.
And for that, I will give the slight edge to that one. I think both are great looking figures at this point in my life, either or on the shelf.
Yeah.
I'm all good. Right. But the child in me would lean towards the 1997 figure.
I agree with you from that perspective. When I said the 91, I'm thinking more of collector on a shelf. But if you're talking playability, it's probably the vibrators.
It is.
All right.
Yeah.
And now
let's
judge the packaging.
Oh, packaging wise,
which has the better packaging?
I like those ones. Right, they're on the screen now. I like that one more.
I love the WCW Nitro tag, like the whole thing, the tag team, everything about it. Packaging wise, I think it's kind of a tie here, though, because I think the original packaging, the old school, the retro part of it, that's stuff that is being brought back. Yes. And I love like the. I mean, it almost looks like a height thing, right? The way that they're doing it, and it's like you have the lines going up. It's really simplistic, but it's the intensity of both of the images with Luger and Sting, and then you have the figures. I would argue that either packaging, it's kind of a wash, but I actually packaging wise might lean towards this one.
It's kind of funny looking at it, like as we've seen a lot of stuff over the years. It's kind of funny, like when you go through time and you see a package like that, not knowing what year it's from. I can look at that and guess.
Pause.
90.
You can't. The total package, Lex Luger. There's too many puns happening here too. It's in both figure boxes. We've said package far too many times in this segment, and I feel like we have to move on to the next one. Otherwise, this is just going to become a giggle fest and a bunch of jokes, and we can't have that anymore.
We got a lot more show to do.
It's hilarious. We're talking the Stinger. This one is fascinating to me. These are the 12-inch ones, correct?
Yes.
And that's OS
Original
FTM,
San
which is
Francisco.
original San Francisco Toy Company.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, a town, classic FAO Schwartz, which unfortunately has been closed.
That's KB Toys.
KB Toys as well.
But they're also out of business. But yes, continue.
They're both closed.
Yes.
FAO Schwartz closed first. I was getting there. Jeez Louise. I was getting to KB Toys. Either way, the point is, the Stinger, you have in both black and white, Hollywood, NWO, red and black, Wolfpack, NWO. One of the few times. I think one of the toughest things about Sting's run in WCW, as great as it was, looking back, is the Wolfpack era, because I loved the Wolfpack so much, except for Sting's involvement. Like, it felt like it derailed his momentum. And that's the only... These are beautiful figures and beautiful collectibles. But dang it, why did he have to go red and black, Sting?
The funny part, and this will go a little bit off the collectible end, but to continue your conversation, it's kind of funny looking back on it, because visually, I love the red and black look, and I love the Wolfpack, but logically, it made no sense, as Sting was the sole defender of WCW, and essentially he abandoned WCW to join another NWO to fight the other NWO, and WCW no longer had that savior, unless you want to say maybe DDP took up the mantle. I guess you can make that argument. As far as the figures go, even though relatively they're probably identical, but honestly, of these two, I think the white and black one face-wise looks better, even though it's probably the same exact face on both of them. But I think it's the paint. I think the white and black one looks better. Or maybe it's just me. What's your thoughts, Clark?
I mean, I think they're equally decent representations given the time of Sting's character. The hair was longer during the red and black era. The paint isn't a thing for me here as much. I get that it looks in the package maybe, but I don't know, man. I think this was a really good figure. Both are. It's cool that they have both. But this, to me, of the bunch that we've viewed thus far and what I know happened in the future, as far as other figures, this isn't my favorite combo.
No, it's definitely not. There's
not. This isn't one that I would. It's no knock. Like, it's a cool one to have in your collection, but it's not one that I would necessarily want to invest in out of the gates.
I think this is a completionist figure.
Right.
If you're a completionist, you want it, but personally, I wouldn't spend the money for this one.
Yeah, this wouldn't be my first choice in the least. All right, let's talk about the next one.
I want to ask.
Go ahead, Kobe. Ask.
Just on your opinion, because this is obviously out of left field with what I'm going to ask. I want to know, since we can see the fact that there are essentially two versions of the same series. Of course, we have Crow Sting, we have Wolfpack Sting, we have the white and black paint being a KB Toys exclusive. I want to know, what influence do you think these figures have on the current concept of chase figures, and how it's going to be the same figure line, but there's going to be a different attire?
I think that's
this
key.
Has influenced, or
I think it's a great call, Kobe.
Starting of that, or anything along.
You're looking at what you're looking at. Nearly 30 years in the past, right? And I think that's a great concept that you just brought up. I think for sure it has an influence on chase figures. I think chase figures are one of the keys to collecting. They're one of the most fun things. Finding one in public, I think, is still of relevance. Ordering one online is of relevance. It's important being able to find the figures that are more difficult to find. I don't know that necessarily that was the plan with this particular figure, but having both versions, absolutely, I think it has an influence on the current state of figure collecting.
It definitely started with, quite frankly, KB probably went, hey, what if we get an exclusive that gets people in our stores? Like, that's kind of, I think, how this started. The exclusive figure, the exclusive CD at a store, the exclusive whatever, like that marketing was a thing you would see here and there, back then, at least from what I recall. But like the standard, like the chase figures and stuff like that, that's a more modern thing. Like, as far as it being a standard, like there it was like here and there. I don't specifically remember seeing that a lot back then. I could be misremembering, or maybe I don't recall, but I don't remember that being like a standard back then.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember. I mean, as far as both WCW and WWE chase figures were in existence in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember that being a big deal and being able to get like I can't remember the exact figure that I was like most obsessed with getting the chase version of, but like
Mm-hmm.
it was a big deal as far back as that. But I mean, this is the early version of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, even having like just in part of that, I think, is the nature of the wrestling industry as a whole. So
And the
you look
collecting
at
industry too.
Nash and Hall leaving and having both versions of figures, right? Having Nash and Hall and Razor and Diesel
Mm-hmm.
was cool, at least during my childhood, during that period. And yeah, I mean, I definitely do think though that to this day, as the industry has evolved, so
Mm-hmm.
has collecting action figures and collecting collectibles.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up in a spot where you want both the Crow version of Sting,
Yeah.
the red and black version of Sting,
Mm-hmm.
the Surfer Sting,
Yeah.
the
All the
Joker
versions. Yeah.
Sting,
Mm-hmm.
what have you, and it's yeah, I think it's a huge factor when it comes to collecting, for me at least, too,
Mm-hmm.
because the special gear is what makes moments in wrestling special, right?
It
And
ties you
and
to those moments and makes you remember those moments. One of the
yeah,
things that you had mentioned about Hall and Nash and Diesel and Razor. I don't know if you remember this, but after they had jumped to WCW, uh, Jax actually released a 2-pack, which
that's
they had
right.
not released when they were in the company because they were never a tag team in WWF. They released a Diesel and Razor Ramon 2-pack
That's right.
to capitalize on the whole uh, NWO.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things. Got to take advantage while strike while the iron's hot, as they
Absolutely.
say. Now, let's talk about another one. This is a TNA Marvel Toys Toy Biz 12-inch Sting,
Yeah.
which this thing is, to me, that's not even an action figure. That's a statue. Talk to me about this one, Anthony.
This is one that's wild because I became aware of it a couple years ago. And it's one personally I have tried to track down. And it's wild because you can't find it on eBay, you can't find it on Macari. I've looked around. The only place I found it was the place that has this image right now, but they said, "Hey, we want $180 for it, but one of the legs isn't attached." I'm like, "Yeah, no, not for that price." But it's one of those ones. TNA did some exclusive figures. They did a 12-inch Sting and a 12-inch AJ in the first series wave. Their plan was to do, because they showed it at a toy fair, there was supposed to be a Christopher Daniels and a Christian Cage. Those never came out.
Yeah.
I contacted matter of fact, fairly recently, because thinking of Sting with his retirement, I was like, well, maybe there's a chance. I actually reached out to a couple collectible places.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I reached out to a couple collectible places and said, hey, any possibility do you have this? And most of the responses were like, no. One guy actually did get back to me and said, I have never seen this figure before. And I dug in to try to find out. He goes, what do you know about this figure? Because he didn't even know about it. So it's kind of funny. Like, either people never seen this figure, and I personally think this is probably the best Stinger that's ever been made.
Yeah.
From likeness wise, not only is the jacket cloth goods, so is the attire. That's all cloth goods. The singlet and everything. And it comes with the NWA title. Because at that time that was the world title in TNA at the time. It is absolutely one of the most iconic representations, and really, I think it's the best one that's ever been made, personally.
It is a good looking figure, but as you know, for me, it's about playability.
Mm-hmm.
And who does he wrestle?
Well, he
As
could
a
wrestle.
12-inch.
He could wrestle
He
the
is
AJ.
double the size.
He
now
could
all
wrestle
of a
the
sudden,
AJ.
Now, unless you get the AJ, now I'm booking Sting as the Great Khali against my other figures, and I'm running into trouble. I think it's as gorgeous as any figure you could ever ask for. Like, to your point, like, it is probably the best looking one. It's a fascinatingly beautiful action figure. But this is a definitive display piece.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is a key thing we got to mention when it comes to this segment. I think without question. Now let's get closer into the 2000s. Let's get closer to the present. Let's just jump a few years. Let's talk about 2006. Let's talk about Marvel Toys Lockdown Series 3. Sting and Jeff Jarrett, of all people.
Yep.
Okay. We've covered figures through the 90s. These don't even look playable. What are we doing here? I'm going to use a Clark Taylor trope from way back in the day here. What are we doing here? Because Jeff Jarrett's just looking to the side. How do you deliver the stroke on Sting? How do you do a hook to hit the Scorpion Death Drop? Like, it's playability. This isn't a display figure, and it's supposed to be.
No. This was a playable one. This was
actually supposed to have playability, and it doesn't.
This was the same company that made WCW figures, the last WCW figures,
which were good.
So it is the same company. I mean, I think it is articulate. Like, I do think you could use them more than the vibrator ones that we covered earlier.
Definitely.
But I'm more fascinated with the expression on the Sting face, because it's the Sting angry face or the yelling face, which is not something that we see a lot of for the Sting figures. Usually it's a stoic face.
Okay, and not to cut you off, but what I would say is, do you think they tried to get him yelling woo, his version of woo?
I'm thinking
and missed? Or do you think it was an angry face? Because I'm confused on that myself. That direction I was going to go was, this was them attempting to have him saying woo, but it was a miss.
My thought is it is either an expression with him supposedly flexing, or it looks like, and I may be seeing things, but it looks like almost like capture when he says it's showtime, and he did it with the teeth. Like, that's what I'm visualizing there. I don't know what the story is with the Jeff. The Jeff is just him staring. But
he's looking to his right.
Yeah, he's very much going, are you seeing this? That's what the expression is. To me, it is a crime to release a Jeff Jarrett figure without a guitar. If that does not have a guitar and Sting doesn't have the bat, I think that's a mistake right there.
You need the weapons.
Yes, you need the weapons. But yeah, so that's that's my thoughts on that one.
I'm with you. Let's talk about another one from TNA. Let's talk about the Jakks Pacific Genesis Series 1 Genesis multi-pack. This one's it's a multi-pack.
Mm-hmm.
As expected, you have Sting, you have Jeff Jarrett, and you have Samoa Joe.
Mm-hmm.
This is arguably the goofiest figure set
I think
I've ever seen.
Clark, I have to say, without a doubt, this is the worst one we've looked at so far.
God bless all three performers, but that is horrifyingly awful.
The Samoa Joe, the body is not his body at all.
That's psychosis.
Joe has never had a six-pack. His head looks like a bobblehead. Jeff Jarrett, again, that body is not Jeff Jarrett's.
Samoa Joe is a luchador figure. Sting somehow looks like Sting. That's the most impressive part about Sting is he's like repeatable. But Anthony, this is horrifying.
Listen,
no. Kobe. Show the figure again. This is ridiculous. You're kidding me. Samoa Joe is on the right. Everybody when you watch this, the one on the right is Samoa Joe. You don't even have to analyze it.
No,
the craziest part to me is Sting looks like Sting. Jeff Jarrett looks like maybe Jeff Jarrett. And Samoa Joe looks like psychosis with a face tattoo. Maybe at best. Maybe no, he doesn't even there's no maybe at best. This is not, you can't. Samoa Joe is supposed to be on the far right. That is a luchador.
Okay. So
he's shorter than both of the other figures.
Okay. This is what I'm going to say. The Samoa Joe, even though the body doesn't look right, the only positive I could say is face likeness wise, you can tell it's Joe. I think it's a pretty decent Joe likeness.
No, you can't.
Listen, I think it.
You are reaching.
Okay.
There's a reach-in foul. That's going to be 2 shots.
Listen, the Jeff Jarrett looks like a druggie on the corner looking for a fix.
No, Jarrett looks more like that is not. There's nothing about Samoa Joe that looks like Samoa Joe. When's the last time Samoa Joe wore pants?
Listen, he's also wearing the Samoan paint when Taz managed him. So we're not.
But it's not. That is.
I just mean the eyes, the mouth, the nose. I do see Joe there, but the head size is wrong.
I've watched almost every home run derby, and that is literally a run with all swings and misses in a home run derby.
But by the way,
that is how it's all whiffs.
By the way, when have we ever seen Sting in the Crow version not wearing gloves?
Who cares? Honestly, it's the closest likeness. This is. I clearly pre-show prep wise did not do
prep
enough
on this one. Yeah.
Just because the Samoa Joe thing, I'll never get over it. That is the worst likeness I've ever seen in the history of an action figure. He literally looks like a luchador.
The body's wrong.
Knock it off, dude. The entire thing's wrong. He's wearing pants.
I said the body is wrong. The whole body is wrong.
It's absurd.
The head's too big for it as well.
Bad. The whole thing, that is outlandish. I can't even. I don't know that I'll ever recover from this.
All right.
Honestly, as a collector, I want to buy this one. I want to buy this one to spend more time making fun of it.
Okay.
Genuinely. This is the worst action figure that we've covered in the history of Sold Separately. And I mean that I want to buy the figure. Like, I have to have this one at this point because
it's so bad.
That is Samoa Joe is supposed to be on the far right. And I'll never get over that.
All right.
I'll never get over it, dude. That is unbelievable.
You're going to have to get over it. We got a few
They literally put like mosh from the like they put mosh from the Headbangers on the far right with the face paint.
But by the way,
without a kilt.
By the way, the Cocoa Puffs hat works perfectly with that take, by the way.
Ridiculous.
Go.
That is an absurd. That is an absurdly awful figure.
Uh-huh. Any words about the world title around Sting's waist?
I think it's too. I think the belt's too big. I think the belt looks too big on the street.
At least it looks like Sting.
Yes, that's the one positive.
That one is identifiably Sting, and the one in the middle is identifiably Jarrett. That is so not Samoa Joe. That is not Samoa Joe.
I like how none of them have like decorated pants or tights.
Oh no! This was as cheap as you could make it.
No.
100%.
The one of them, the Jarrett and the Sting, are like cheaply bad. The Samoa Joe is the worst figure I've ever seen. Like, that's not even close. It's so bad.
Okay.
You can't make it up.
Is that worse than the Shawn Michaels with actual chest hair?
Yes, okay. It is. Yes, it is.
All right.
Yes, by a lot. Okay. Because you look at the Shawn Michaels one and identify that it's Shawn.
Okay.
If you look at that figure, that is not Samoa Joe.
It's Samoa Joe's head.
No, it's no. No, it's not.
Kobe,
if you cover Samoa Joe in the corner, this is disrespectful to Samoa Joe.
It is.
If you were to cover Samoa Joe in the corner, it's disrespectful to Joe that could possibly be him inside of that action figure package. It's the worst figure we've ever covered on the show.
It is.
And we have multiple episodes, but it's no. Like, the other two are fine. In this 3-pack, that Samoa Joe figure is bar none. It's not even close. It's the worst one ever. Okay. It is the worst action figure ever made of a person. Okay. Like, that is just bogus. Like, they took the generic creative character with a face tattoo, and they're like, it's Samoa Joe. And they just tucked him in the 3-pack. Like, if you bought that figure for somebody that still watches wrestling now, you bought that, and they're going to play with them now all of a sudden, and they're watching AEW, the world champion in AEW this week, and they look up and they're like, oh, do I have a Samoa Joe figure? They don't think they have one because that's not Samoa Joe.
Keep in mind, this was only 14 years ago. Like, we've seen other figures made that looked more like people.
I'm telling you, on Sold Separately on this program,
God.
The most hideous figure we've ever covered is the Samoa Joe figure in that 3-pack, and it's not close.
All right.
There's not even one.
I am not arguing with
you. Egregious. It's like, honestly, I'm emotionally moved by how bad it is. Like, I want to buy one only because it's the funniest thing in the world to me. I cannot believe that anybody thought that looked anything like Samoa Joe. It's the most ridiculous action figure produced in the last 30 years that I've seen in my professional career. And I'll put my name on that. And let's move on to the next one. Speaking of Jax Pacific, let's talk about the Legend of the Ring Series 1. Okay. Much better. Way better. Way better.
Yeah.
We got the Stinger. It's Surfer Sting. Anthony, talk to me about it.
Here's the wild part, and I don't mean to get you on the rant again. This was released the same year as that other one. So I don't know what happened between
Something happened
between A and point B. I do think it's a great representation. This was, predates, the AEW Luminaires line, but it was along the same lines. Jax used to make the WWF or WWE at that point Legends figures, the Superstars figures, and they would do Legends. This was their version under TNA. The only negative that I could possibly say about this figure, like I said, I think it looks awesome. The only negative I would say is I would have preferred if the image on the side of the box wasn't Crow Sting and instead Surfer Sting, because it would match. Realistically, that's the only negative thing I could possibly say about this figure.
Well, I hear you where you're coming from on that. I will say at the time, it's Crow Sting character wise in
it's so recognizable.
Active in TNA.
Yeah.
So for recognizability, it's kind of like a chase figure in and of itself. So from a marketing standpoint, sellability wise, it made a ton of sense on shelves. Yeah. I think it's the best looking figure compared to the last one. Like, what are we even talking about, right? It's not close.
The bar's not high.
We have the video game in the same time frame.
Oh, don't go back.
It's just, yeah.
There's no good can come from this.
That's not Samoa Joe. That's a pair of jeans. He's wearing jeans.
It's not even jeans. It's just black pants.
It's ridiculous.
Okay.
The entire thing is absurd. And the net of it is, though, that Stinger I loved. I love the fact that they were allowed to put out the Surfer Sting.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see more as we get closer to the modern figures. We're going to see more from Mattel. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of Jax figures. Mm-hmm. Jax figures is what I really grew up with mostly.
Me too.
That's where I thought the best work was done when it came to action figures. This is one of the better ones. Absolutely. Yep. And obviously one of my biggest complaints is always like, what would 12-year-old Clark think? 12-year-old Clark think, right? Playability. It's all about playability. This one's got playability. You can deliver some stinger splashes if you got the ring in the corner. And to me, that's key. Let's talk about our next one. Let's get to 2010, because this is where it starts to get real serious here. Mm-hmm. We've got the Jax Pacific Genesis Series 1. This isn't a multi-pack, correct? This is
the 2011 Jax Pacific Deluxe Series 6 thing.
Sorry, Deluxe Series 6. We already did the Legends of the Ring one.
That was the last one. Just did.
Can we
Samoa Joe mentioned you.
Edit that out, Cobe. Anyway, I'm sorry, not you, literally, but we'll do that later. The Jax Pacific Deluxe Series 6.
Yes.
Now we're talking different face paint, little interesting. I don't know. I think it's very playable. I like the figure. It's not my favorite one ever made. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts, though, Anthony, on this one?
It's definitely a playable figure. I don't really recall him doing the red and black face paint and not wearing the red and black gear. Him wearing the Crow one. I think it's a good likeness. Historically accurate, I don't believe it is. I could be wrong. I could be misremembering. Again, it was, 13 years ago when this thing came out. But I don't recall him doing the white and black gear and the red and black paint. It may have been a one-off, maybe on an Impact show, maybe. But yeah, it's not the greatest thing in the world. But again, I think this is one of those ones that a completionist would want. But it's not one that, like, if I wanted a Sting from each era, which is what I ultimately ended up doing, this would not be one.
Yeah, it's a funky one because it feels like kind of a one-off. It's weird. It's like he's wearing different gear than you would expect with the red face paint.
Yes.
And it's and it's not Joker Sting. It's not a different iteration. I don't know. As a Sting fan, there's been many great iterations of the face paint.
Mm-hmm.
The red and black, I did enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
As a fan of Sting, as far as the way the character looks in hindsight, not my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's a cool figure, but it's not my favorite. Playability wise, my ultimate measure though, it's got playability.
It does have that.
If we're gonna open it and give it to somebody that's gonna play with it, stinger splashes, a few scorpion death drops, and a scorpion death lock, and we're good to go, right? I mean, that's the key. Let's move on though to our next one.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Joker himself. The Joker. This thing is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it's got playability. Talk about it, Anthony.
Yeah, they only made 2 Joker Stings. And I actually have this one. I got it years after they had made it, but I picked it up. I want to say I paid like about $60 for it. It's going for a lot more than that now. So every time I say it now, when I'm looking for that other Sting figure that I tried to get, the 12-inch, that one occasionally comes up and it goes for well over $100 now. So I'm like, well, at least I got it for less. The jacket is awesome. It's a lot of high detail to it. It's got the fringes. There is a Sting on the back, a scorpion on the back. And it's a different Sting. It's, when you look at Sting's career, it's the original Blade Runner, which oddly enough, I'm surprised no one has made the Blade Runner Sting yet. I think AEW was supposed to make one under the Luminaires line, I think, but I could be wrong. But you look at it, you have Surfer Sting, you have Crow Sting, you have Wolfpack Sting, Joker Sting is the iteration that a lot of people. It's probably one of the most underrated. I mean, granted, it's kind of funny. I don't want to say it's a ripoff, but it's greatly inspired by the Heath Ledger Joker.
Right.
But the same way the Crow Sting was inspired by the movie The Crow.
Yeah.
So, Sting's career, he's picked up inspirations from here and there, but like Joker Sting is really, I don't even want to say the word psychotic, but like it's a very deranged version of Sting, one that we've never really seen up to this point. And I think it is one of those highlight characters. It's one of those ones you didn't think he had another version in him, but he created this. And I think it's, it's maybe not as iconic as, Crow or Wolfpack, but it's definitely one of those ones that I fondly remember and was like, well, if I'm going to get a one from like each era of Sting, I need Joker.
Absolutely. And the Joker character, I actually look upon pretty dang fondly. Like I thought Sting was excellent in that role. He made sense playing it at the time. I get that it was inspired by the Heath Ledger stuff, which makes a ton of sense. I think a lot of characters are. A la Swerve Strickland lately. I would say Seth Rollins has taken quite a bit from that character. I think quite a few people on screen wrestling wise have taken from that character, and rightfully so, because it was so deep and so excellently delivered that the Sting version is maybe not the most memorable part of Sting's career, but it's one that is worth, tossing to the canon in action figure form without question, as well as when reminiscing. What I would say is, I don't know if it's my favorite version of Sting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
But it is something worth talking about for sure. Let's move on to our next one though. Kobe, let's show it. Let's see it. What are we looking at here? action figure wise. That's not the final one.
End of the show.
It is.
Oh, that's slide 12?
Yeah, that's slide 12.
Oh, well, then let me do that. We're going to have to edit this. Okay, let me close this. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 1. Tune in to episode 2. Thank you so much for tuning in. On behalf of me, Clark Taylor, Anthony Ricciardi, sold separately, Kobe Galanzowski, thank you so much for producing. Check out episode 2. Check out everything on Wrestling Republic. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, please do. Have an excellent day.